and welcome to the Growth Whisperers podcast, where everything that Brad and I talk about is related to building enduring great companies, because that's what we care about. I'm Kevin Lawrence. I'm here today, as always, for the 107th time with the wonderful Brad Giles from down in Australia. Brad, how you doing today?
Wonderful, wonderful. Beautiful times. Had a super intense week last week with clients and having a couple of days off this week, which is great.
Nice. I had actually a free day, I call it, last week, which was awesome to go around and get some of my motorsports stuff sorted out for the season. And that was great today to have 2/3 of my team face-to-face for a quarterly. And that was awesome to have everyone back together again. And there's just nothing like being in person for the connection and the relational part. Sometimes it's not as productive because you get, chatting, which is also, I think, a wonderful thing for your bonds and your relationships and the culture. Anyways, yeah, it's great. So what are we digging into today? What's the topic today, Brad?
Today, the trap of thinking that software is management. The trap of thinking that software is management. Unusual title, perhaps, but something that we've come across. And we spent a very long time talking about this subject today.
Yes, we had a great debate about it. We'll get into that. So what's the word of the day? What's your word of the day today?
Oh, look, it's really recuperation. Last week, I was starting between 6 and 7 a.m. every day, and some of my last meetings were at 8 at night. And so, yeah, for me, I've just switched off and really had the opportunity to recuperate. And what about you, Kev?
Well, mine was similar last week because I was back from a break. Mine today is who, and not like the owl. Actually, I should talk about the owl. I'm going to go with who for 2 reasons, because we just used this amazing, and it's not a new thing called the Meeting Owl Pro. If you've got a bunch of people in a room, and most of those video conferencing systems are challenging to be able to see people and hear people, we have to hack around them all the time. And we used it for a meeting today, and it was outstanding because it just sits in the middle of the table. So that's one part of who. The other part of who is, when you're stuck on something, as Jim Collins has said many times in sessions with him, is that your first question should be a who question. So that's something. So who, from the owl perspective, because it's an amazing tool for running virtual meetings or when there's people in person in a boardroom or a room or a meeting room. And then who, just always think about who is the best person that you can call to get something done. All right, well, let's dig into this. But then, and sewing those together, like who is going to make sure that you get the rejuvenation? Maybe that would be the question. Who? In my world, I need some accountability sometimes because I don't do enough. That's not a great sew together of those two, but we'll take it.
Awesome.
So let's dig into this trap of thinking software as management. I gotta say, when Brad and I were talking about this as we're preparing for the show, he's explaining some of the stuff that he's seen in some companies. And I've seen some similar examples from a different lens of people thinking that software is actually management. And some bad words started coming out of my mouth. I'm like, what the beep, beep, beep are you talking about? Like, of course, software can't manage people. And he's going, that's not the things that some people are thinking that is a great idea these days. And he had some examples. So Brad, I'll just say is that we had some very great debates about this. Part of me was saying, that's absolutely Looney Tunes. And he goes, yeah, but Kevin, you're not a 23-year-old tech entrepreneur. That's true. I'm past that. So, Brad, tell us more about what we're thinking here and set up our conversation before we get into our concrete ideas.
Thank you. Well, it's a trap. Okay. It's a trap that we can think that software is management, and specifically management is management and software is software. That's kind of obvious, right? But
yeah,
more and more as the software as a service, industry continues to flourish. There's a great saying from there that software will eat the world. But there's no substitute for having conversations with one's manager. And that's what employees need. And that's what employees often crave, is engagement with their manager to help them to understand how to succeed. And then there's also accountability. So there's a number of different areas that management applies that drives employee engagement, that software, it just, like, in the foreseeable future, it won't be able to counter. And so we've got to be careful, because it is a trap. We've got to be careful that we don't begin to think that software can actually take over the role of managing people and driving employee engagement.
Yeah, it totally insanely logical to me, but so tell us about some of the people that are going down a different road. Can you give some examples, Brad? You shared some with me earlier, and what some of that thinking is that I just can't relate to.
Yeah. So I'm writing a book about onboarding as an example. And I have seen it in the onboarding world where people are selling software, and what they're trying to do is say that this is everything onboarding. Okay. So as a manager, you will have a new hire come into the firm, and the onboarding, everything will be done by an automated process or software or what have you. And this employee will, after they've been through the onboarding that is automated, they will front up to the manager and they will be pristine. They will have a little bow tied around them because it's all perfect. But the problem is that may be a utopia for the manager, right?
Sure.
But imagine if you're the new hire that's coming into this firm, and you come in and you meet with the HR on your first day, and then they say, all right, so here's what we want you to do. We want you to watch these 100 videos, and we want you to read these 27 documents. And then once you've done that, then maybe in 2 or 3 days, you can go and you'll meet with your manager and he'll get you on the job.
But people don't do that, do they?
Well, do they do it, or is it something that people are a trap that people are unwittingly beginning to observe? It's the same as the hiring trap, right? So the hiring trap is that people think that there's a vacancy, people are going to turn up on the day after you place the vacancy, they will be an A player and they'll be able to start the day after, right? It's a trap in the same way that this can be a trap.
Sure. And if you listen to the marketing from some of the, the digital recruitment companies, they talk about matching candidates and stuff like that. And we know that's not, one day maybe that'll happen. And I've got a company that's trying to work on making that happen. They're working on it. But yeah, and the one thing that we know is that software can be very powerful for enabling things in business. Yeah. And it can also be a big pit of energy, money, time for things that it claims to do and it doesn't. So really what you're saying here is that, what we're saying here is, be careful of software that automates things that really should, in the short, medium, and long term, be done by a manager with people, because it adds to the engagement and the experience of the employee. So basically, don't let the software remove the valuable part of the humanness of work.
Yeah. So imagine this. Imagine that you have a football team and you're watching the football game. What do you see in the break? So all teams will have a break, maybe a quarter. At the quarter time, the team players will all run off to the coach or the series of coaches, and they will all provide them with coaching and feedback and accountability and a whole range of things. Okay. Well, that is akin to management. Okay. We are dealing with those employees. The players are running off and they're having a human to human experience. Well, imagine instead of that, if they came off the field and then they went and looked at a series of iPad screens. So then you've got like the 12 or 20 players and they're all looking at the screens.
It'd be funny. It'd be hilarious.
It would be funny, but we can't imagine that in the foreseeable future. And like that engagement from a human is missing, that passion.
Yeah.
Right. And so we've got to be careful that we don't fall into the trap of not driving employee engagement.
Yes. And basically those management touch points that are incredibly high value and critical.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Great. So our first kind of point on this is that software matters. It is critical to growing and scaling most companies these days. It automates processes that are inefficient, and it can make people more effective. No two ways about it. And even with onboarding, there is software and things that can assist in that and making an awesome onboarding process. Like I know for our team, we're still using an Excel spreadsheet for it to help us to map it out. I mean, even the fact that we have 13-week onboarding plan, interesting as a side note, one of our newest people that we onboarded just gave feedback on our meeting that it was the most incredible onboarding they've ever had. They never felt so supported, included, educated. And there's a guy, Dean on my team who drives that part, did a magical job of it. And if we were at scale, we probably would have software to assist with it. But the key is, it's about the involvement in getting to know the people, the culture and things, and building relationships, and not letting the software do jobs that it shouldn't be doing. In many ways, it's almost, and here's like another great example. I'm thinking about this. It's like you go out to a spectacular restaurant. I don't want to be typing in my order to an iPad on the table, right? At a 5-star restaurant. That's just not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for an experience and to feel important and taken care of and enjoy the evening. I don't want to be ordering off that. That's it. Now, if I'm going to order takeout, I'm happy to do it online. Those are two very different experiences. And with our most important people we hire, we just don't want to take them like a takeout, treat them like a takeout order.
No, because you're talking about only going out for dinner, which is 1 or 2 hours. But this is like 8, 10, 12 hours a day. Like this, work consumes so much of people's time and lives. So and that is from their perspective, but let's not come back, right? Retention matters. Employee engagement matters. Like these things have real tangible outputs. So moving on to the next point, software doesn't replace the human to human experience. And that's what you're kind of saying, right? It doesn't replace the culture. It doesn't replace the motivation or the accountability, but managers must still manage people. Managers' job is to help people to perform, to achieve the results that they need. I mean, that's
almost a great definition of management you just said there, Brad. Managers help people to perform or to achieve what is expected of them. Awesome. Love that.
So that is to understand what is to expected of them, right? So they help them to understand, and then they help to provide feedback and course correction and all of those things. I mean, Google actually tried an experience where they had no managers. Google tried the experiment. I think it was in the mid 2000s or early 2000s. Yeah. And
it was at least a decade ago from my recollection.
Yeah. So a lot of engineers said, we're a modern company. We don't need to have managers. We can manage ourselves. We use the OKR system. It's highly effective and we can do that, right? Yeah. And then they began to see some terrible outcomes as a result. So I think it lasted for about 9 months to 12 months. And then they began to see the real ramifications of not having managers. And so then they said, look, we're going to do it the Google way. It's not going to be the traditional way, but we still need managers to help people to understand what's expected of them, how to course correct, to coach and to hold them accountable, all of those types of things.
Yep. Makes sense. And, we even said before, there's some AI software trying to run meetings and things. And, the thing that software doesn't do that great managers do is also to empathize with people, hear them, feel it, and then be there to help them find their own ways and figure out their own answers. But there's support in many ways, good management sometimes is like good parenting of young children. You're helping to grow and develop and make them independent and teach them skills. And again, we're massive believers in technology. It's just letting it do the job, letting technology do the jobs it shouldn't. Awesome.
Yeah. So, yeah, we are massive fans of technology, but if you are looking at technology, just think, is this going a little tiny bit too far? Is this going to affect my employee engagement?
Yep.
Is in that way? I mean, can you imagine, for example, being managed by Siri? You know, I mean, Siri would have to be one of the best artificial intelligence or human to human experiences that we get with software, right? In a verbal kind of way. And so there's Siri for Apple, or I think it's Bixby for Google.
Or I mean, Alexa for Amazon. Yeah. I yell at Alexa all the time. Yeah.
Like, this is the best job on a B2C type environment. This is the best job that the biggest technology companies in the world can provide us.
Yep.
And like, it's awful half the time. Maybe it's just that you know, I'm from Australia and we have a different accent, but I think it's generally, probably. It's just generally
okay and often frustrating.
And that's for simple things. Like, can you tell me how to get to the local shop? This is like, can you imagine if Siri was your manager? It's farcical to even think about,
and maybe one day, but it sure ain't there today.
They sure ain't there today. That's right.
No.
And it would lead to disengagement and retention issues.
Yes, and good managers help with that. Good managers help with engagement and helping, find ways for people to be supported and believed in, and giving the tidbits they need or the acknowledgement they need, or whatever it happens to be. And again, there's parts of that you wouldn't want software to be able to do, and maybe it will one day, but it sure isn't there today.
Yeah.
And then when the other thing is the software helping employees become more efficient by replacing menial data-driven tasks, or is it replacing management of people? So if you're replacing inefficient data entry or repeated data entry or anything that's just a grind, now you have to do the ROI on it, and you got to test it and see, does it actually make it better? Because there's a lot of times when people think it makes it better and it doesn't. But there's doing that kind of stuff can be really, really good. Like even just in our team meeting today, it's a basic thing, but we're just talking about the use of digital signatures for client signatures on projects, right? We've been doing it the old way. Here it is, sign it, send it back. And people can digitally sign a PDF, but if you send like DocuSign, they open it up, they click, they put their signature in, and they just sign in a few spots. It takes 17 seconds and it's easy. There's things like that. Automating stuff like that is a no-brainer for some companies that have a lot of people signing things. But that's fine. Versus holding people accountable, coaching, motivating, and even the idea of trying to replace meetings just makes me cringe with stuff like that, because you're losing that relational, the teaching moments, the coaching moments, all those other things.
Yeah. So ask yourself, is this software helping employees become more efficient by replacing menial data-driven tasks, or is it replacing the management of people? So coaching, motivating, holding people accountable. Like, that's the kind of line in the sand that we might be advocating that you think about. Like, there's got to be an area where if we go too far, it's going to negatively impact these areas.
Yep. Awesome. So the main point, just to kind of review this, the whole point is be careful not to let your automation and software pieces take away the management, which is the one-on-one helping people to be great at their job. So software does matter. You just got to make sure that it's helping things to be more efficient. It doesn't replace the human experience, the human interface, the building of culture and motivation and accountability and helping them see their potential and growth, etc. Brad, do you want to do the last two there?
Of course. Yeah. So as an example, an extreme example, think about some of the software that you interact with at a human level, like Siri or Bixby from Apple or Google, or even Amazon Alexa. Can you imagine this person being your manager? And that's extreme, but we know it would lead to disengagement and retention issues. So we've got to, as leaders in the business, we've got to know that we can push this stuff too far. And some of the software companies will keep selling us the stuff, but we need to hold the line sometimes, knowing that it could impact our retention. And then finally, we've got to ask ourselves, is this helping employees become more efficient? In other words, is it replacing menial data-driven tasks, or is it replacing actually managing people, coaching, motivating, and holding people accountable? Well, that was a good chat, Kev. Nice and quick. We probably spent about 1/4 of the time doing the episode as we did actually debating it and getting clear on it.
That's the truth. We spent like an hour at least discussing and debating this one. Yes. All right.
But that's okay. Like we coalesced our thoughts, which matters. So
yes.
Let's move to close. You can find myself, Brad Giles, at evolutionpartners.com.au. And I've got an interesting newsletter that I put out every week. You may be able to subscribe to there. Of course, Kevin, you can find at lawrenceandco.com. And he equally has an interesting newsletter you can subscribe to there. You can find the two of us on YouTube if that takes your fancy. And of course, where all good podcasts are found, wherever you get your fix. Thanks for listening to the Growth Whisperers. We hope that you have a great week.
Have a good one.